Your faith can move the mountains. Let the mountains move. We come with expectation. We waiting here for you. Waiting here for you. You're the Lord of all creation. Still you know my heart. The author of salvation. You love me from the start. Waiting here for you. With hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore, singing hallelujah. Waiting here for you. You were everything you promised. Oh, your faithfulness is true. We're desperate for your presence. All we need is you. Waiting here for you. With hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore, singing hallelujah. Singing waiting here for you. With our hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore, singing waiting here for you. With our hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore, singing hallelujah, singing hallelujah. Waiting here for you. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am the child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am the child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Oh, love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am the child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am the child of God. You split the sea so I can walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I can stand and sing. I am the child of God. You split the sea so I can walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me and now we stand and sing. I am the child of God. Yes, I am. I am the child of God. Yes, I am. I am the child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am the child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. And I am the child
Say the Jesus Creed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these.
Today we're talking about fear. What is fear? Fear of being scared of something. How cute was that little boy? But how true was it what he said? The fact of God has not given us a spirit of fear. Now I wonder what kind of things you're scared of. Now kids, I wonder if you can share with your parents. Maybe things that you've been scared of in the past, maybe things that you're scared of now. The parents also share with your kids. And if you haven't got any kids in the room, just share with each other. If you've got no one in the room, just have a little think about things in the past that you might have been fearful of, or things right now that you're fearful of. And I just know a lot of things with kids is things like, I'm scared of the dark, or I'm scared that my parents are going to get sick. I'm scared of a test that I need to write at school. I'm scared that I'm not good enough for certain things like sport or something. Or maybe it's scared of spiders or scared of snakes. Who knows? But there's loads of stuff we could be scared of. And it really brought home to me when I was chatting to some adults yesterday, and they said, I'm fearful of what's going to happen now. So I said, oh, what do you mean by that? No, I'm fearful of going for the vaccination for COVID, but I'm also fearful that I could get COVID, so I'm not really sure which one to do. And we really need to give God the power that he has, and not allow fear to enter into our lives. But it's really hard, right? So when he says in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now I want to show you something this morning. And so I've got one bottle here that has no lid, just an empty bottle. And this is going to represent us when we allow fear to get the better of us, when we are scared so much that it just, we just feel it inside, that we're really upset and we're scared and we don't know what to do. Now this bottle with a lid on is going to represent what happens when we tell fear where to go. And because Jesus is in our lives, we don't have to even allow fear to enter into our lives. Okay, so going back to this one, we are scared. We're scared of the dark. We're scared of people getting sick around us. We're scared of vaccinations. We're scared of what could happen around me. We're scared of, walking around our streets. And when we do all that and we allow fear to get into our lives, that's kind of what happens. It breaks us, and we're not very useful. You can't really use that as a bottle at the moment. It's just not useful, and it's not great. So what happens if fear comes and tries to attack us, and it says, I'm scared that I'm going to get COVID, but it's not entering in. I'm scared that I might fail my test, but it's not entering in. I want to play this sport, but I'm really scared I'm not going to be good enough. It doesn't enter in. So God does not give us the spirit of fear. Fear is not of God. This bottle is perfectly fine. But when we allow fear into our lives, this is what happens. It breaks us and it crushes us, and it's not a nice sight. And many of us have been there, myself included. I've allowed stuff to get into my life, into my head, into my heart. But God doesn't want it like that. God wants us to stay like this, to stay whole, and to tell fear that fear has no place in our lives. So this week, as we go into another week, let us go in knowing that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. We don't need to be walking around looking like this, but we do need to be holding our head up high, knowing that Jesus has taken all the rubbish away from us, all the fear, everything that we even dream of or that we are so scared about. He's saying, you walk with me, you're going to have nothing to fear. Not one thing. And I'm going to keep you whole. Hope you enjoyed that. It was just a real visualization of just what can happen when fear enters our life. But pray you have a really good week this week. And remember, no fear is in God.
This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded May His presence be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and the children, and the children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and the children, and the children, and the children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, He is with you, in the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, He is for you. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, 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 He is with you. And may His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, He is with you. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, 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 He is with you.
I heard this week someone say that fear and anxiety seems to be the order of the day. In fact, many professionals would say to us that fear and anxiety seem to rule the world. And as we think about what our world has gone through over the past 18 or so months, what our country has been through over the last number of weeks, it doesn't take a genius to see how fear seems to grip so many parts of this planet that we're a part of. Fear of what's going to happen in the present, fear of what may happen in the future, fear of what may happen to my job, my work, my family, fear in a real sense to what may happen with my health. Am I going to fall victim to catching the COVID-19 virus and find myself struggling to survive and to keep alive and to breathe and to come through it along the other side? Fear seems to actually have been part of the way the world has operated really since the beginning of the fall. And since the fall and evil entered the world, you and I seem to battle with fear. But how do Christians overcome fear? As we have looked at a bit of it this morning, I would love to give you what I think is the way we need to overcome fear. And I want to take you back to the night before Jesus was betrayed. He had just spent the evening with his closest disciples. They had taken the Passover meal together. At that moment, Jesus had hinted that his time towards the cross was happening and was about to happen very, very quickly. Those disciples didn't quite get it. He hinted to them that somebody was going to betray him. And some people, and some of the movies you watch and catch a little bit of the fear that begins to flow around those disciples. At the end of John 14, Jesus says to his disciples, let us leave. And they begin to walk towards the Garden of Gethsemane. And in between that moment and when Jesus prays the incredible prayer just before his betrayal is about to happen in John chapter 17, he says a whole bunch of things. And just before he prays, he says these words. He says, look here, to his disciples, the time is coming. In fact, it is now arrived when you will be scattered, each of you to his own place. You will leave me alone, though I am not alone, because my Father is with me. I have said all these things, all the stuff he has been saying to them between walking out of the Passover meal and just before the priestly prayer in John 17. I've said all these things to you so that you may have peace in me. You'll have trouble in this world, but cheer up. I have defeated it. And at a moment when the entire world of the disciples was about to collapse and fall apart, Jesus says to them, I've said to you a whole bunch of things so that you may have peace in me. Because you're going to have trouble in this world, right? Something you and I face all the time. Trouble in so many different ways and aspects come across our paths in this world. But don't worry, Jesus says, I've overcome it. And we could spend the next 20 hours going through what Jesus said. And I just want to grab a few quick highlights that I really think are some of the things we need to ponder if we are going to overcome fear. In fact, if we had to be honest, so many of us as Christians live in absolute fear. In fact, some of us live in more fear than people who are not Christians when we start listening to all the junk that gets thrown at us from around the world. And I don't know about you, but I want to live victorious. I don't want to live in fear. So, what does Jesus say? As he walks out of the upper room, as they begin to walk towards the garden, the legend goes that they would have walked through one of the gates on the Jerusalem wall. And on the Jerusalem wall was a key symbol, a symbol of a vineyard, a vine and branches, which was a key symbol within the Jewish culture. As you know, we often talk about our worldview, the thing that shapes the way we view the world, is made up of stories, symbols, and questions. And symbols are huge. And Jesus stops at this symbolic picture that sums up so much of Jewish Israeli culture. And for them, the vine would have been Israel, that Israel was the vine in the world, and the branches stretching out into the rest of the world was what God had told Israel to do from the very beginning, which sometimes they got right, sometimes they messed it up, taking the story of God to the world. And Jesus, as he gets to that gate, says, I am the vine. You are the branches. Understand, Jesus says, you're not the vine, I am the vine, you're the branches. And Jesus begins to reinterpret a key symbol within their culture. Why is that important? Because, like we said, worldview is made up of story, symbol, and questions. And what Jesus was doing in that simple statement, talking about the vine and the branches, and we all know it, we all have read it a million times, remain in me and I'll remain in you, all the stuff he talks about, and if you remain in me, you'll bear fruit that will last, which sounds like overcoming, victorious. A tree that bears fruit has overcome all the elements to do what it is called to do. The key is to understand why Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. And if you have been following us at all, we cannot get away from the simple fact that you and I need to know the gospel. And by the gospel, the story of how God becomes king. And what Jesus is doing in this moment is telling his disciples to re-understand their story. Get their story right. And to be honest with you, too many Christians today are living and are listening and are engaging with the wrong story. The gospel is not just about how do I get to heaven when I die, and if I live in fear now, I'll just cower behind my big wall outside, I'll cower behind my door, I'll cower behind my bank account and keep timidly surviving until I get to heaven. When Jesus says, don't worry, I've overcome the world, fear not, and the ongoing idea that we can have victory in this world. The gospel is about how God becomes king, that God is now in charge of this world. Yes, as we are told, you're going to have trouble in this world, but there is a new king who is in town. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what story are we listening to? What gospel are we a part of? Jesus tells his disciples right at the beginning of John 15 to change their story. Get the new narrative, if you like. The story of how through what is about to happen, Jesus' death and resurrection, God is going to defeat evil, the root of fear, the root of suffering, the root of sin. He is going to defeat the very root that brings the fear into our lives. And if we are not on board with that story, if we are not on board with that narrative, if we are interpreting the world we live in through the eyes of the stories that we get in the media, or from the United States for many of us, from the other narratives around us, we are going to live in fear. Jesus has overcome the world. And it's something that we explore over and over again in our devotions, where we are trying to get the right story. Guys have said to me, yes, these devotions are going on for far too long. And they have been going on. I mean, we've just clocked over 600 videos. I hate videos. I hate making videos. I can't stand doing stuff online. But even after 600 videos, the same guys that say it's too long, in a discussion with them, discover they haven't quite got it yet. Let me tell you what I mean. About 7 years ago, I, as a poor pastor living in South Africa, got the chance to drive an Lexus LX 570. You know, you get your Land Cruisers and Land Rovers, then you get the Lexus, the one above. Incredible. And I remember the guy who owned it allowed me to climb into the car, and I sat in this impressively huge, very luxurious off-road 4x4 vehicle. And I looked around and I was a little bit intimidated by what I saw. And he explained to me how the indicators worked, a bit different to my little Safira, indicated to me what is happening, and then he said, let your instincts take over. Once you start, you know how to drive, let your instincts take over. And within a few moments, I was clapping that Lexus around Johannesburg at a high speed like never before. Until he said to me, right, see that speed bump up ahead, just over there? I was like, yeah. He goes, right, I want you to hit that speed bump at 100 kilometers an hour. I was like, what? He goes, trust me, hit that speed bump at 100 kilometers an hour. Now, in my Safira, back then, you hit a speed bump in 100 kilometers an hour, it's goodbye suspension. And I remember driving towards it, and he was saying to me, trust me, go faster. And I watched that clock going 60, 70, 80, getting more and more scared. And at 100, hit that speed bump, and all you heard was tick, 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 tick. Felt nothing. The power of the Lexus. What is the point? The point is, quite simply this. We live in this world. We are going about our day-to-day business. Our instincts are what are leading us from point A to point B to point C to point D. And the instincts that we are taught right from the very beginning, the stories we listen to from our upbringing, school, education, family, our background, everything shapes our instincts. And what we need to do when you climb into a new car, if you like, when you're suddenly confronted with a whole new narrative, the narrative of Christianity. If we do not learn the new narrative so that our instincts change, it'll be exactly the same. My instinct says to me, you take a car, hit a speed bump at 100 kilometers an hour, you're taking that car straight to the mechanic to fix burst tires and suspension. The guy that drives the Alex 570 goes, let me tell you, I will hit that speed bump at 100 kilometers an hour. I will feel nothing in the car. I will probably get a fine, but because I drive the Alex 570, the fine is not a problem. I'll just pay it. Why? Because the car is built to withstand exactly that. My instincts and the guy who owned that Alex 570's instincts are completely different. And the problem is, as we go about our day-to-day lives, if we are not actively allowing the narrative to change, the story to change, if we are not allowing the gospel not just to be a narrow part of it, that when I die I'm going to heaven, fantastic, who cares about this world, to a place where understanding that this world and the story that God has impacts the entire world, the entire history, reaching its climax in Jesus. And we don't work hard at changing the narrative and reshaping our instincts. When the trouble comes, we will default to the instincts we have been brought up with. I cannot encourage and implore each and every one of you more, as we live in times of abject fear. And it's interesting, hey, talking about this 18 months after the coronavirus hit. But just this past week, I can see the fear on so many people who I am engaging with all the time. And Jesus, the very beginning, says to his disciples, change the narrative. You see, when we shift the narrative, when we learn hard, when we allow the Spirit of God, who's there to lead us, as Jesus goes on to say in the other parts of that chapter, to lead us into all truth, the way we respond to fear and suffering changes. Are we going to be exempt from suffering as Christians? Never. Are we going to have a no suffering zone around us, like some people wish they had? No. In fact, Jesus has said in other places that you and I will face probably more suffering for being Christians, because we get to look at the world through a different set of eyes and see what is really happening and going on. But when we are allowing the narrative that we have our worldview shaped by, being dictated to by Jesus as King, what begins to happen is we begin to respond to fear and suffering differently. That's how we overcome it. Again, many Christians will say the way you overcome suffering is when there is no more suffering in your life. And if there is suffering, understand God is angry with you. If you are suffering, understand God might be punishing you for what you have done wrong. Many Christians believe that. But the way we overcome suffering is not to pray it all away, but is to respond to it in the way Jesus intends. And at the heart of the story, as he mentions in the rest of 15 and down in 16, and we haven't got time to explore it deeply, Jesus says this: just do what I say. As you go about your day-to-day life, do what I say. Do not repay evil with evil. Repay evil with good. Obey this simple command: love God and love others. And when you begin to put just those two amongst a few other things together, the way you begin to respond and view to suffering is huge. Very quickly, yesterday morning, so this is now Thursday, yesterday morning, Wednesday, I woke up and I just had this fear around me, and I couldn't understand what it was. And I couldn't quite get what is happening and what is going on. And it's something I've never really experienced, to be honest. I live in a family where I have 2 members of our family who suffer with varying degrees of anxiety and depression. And it's something I can't grasp here. I can see it, I talk about it, can't understand it. And in the middle of the day, I said to God, Joe, you need to speak to me. I'm scared. Speak to me. And God spoke to me in the most bizarrest way. One of the things we do as a family is at around 6 o'clock is we sit and we watch MasterChef together. And I'm a South African, I can't stand Australians at the best of times, but Australian MasterChef is absolutely genius. But I don't know if any of you watched Wednesday evening, which was last night's episode, where at the end, they'd gone through a double elimination. At the end, as they were about to start the second part of the elimination, one of the hard men, the guy's big beard, burly muscles, tats everywhere, put up his hand and he said, I cannot do this anymore. And it was one of the most weirdest moments in MasterChef TV history, if that makes sense, when he was about to quit and he was going to walk out. And he went and he sat with one of the judges, and clearly this wasn't planned. There was tears everywhere, there was lots of emotion, and he was just saying that this fear has overcome him. And he just can't do it anymore. And all he wants to do is get out of that place, go back to his wife and kid. It was nothing to do with the competition, something he has enjoyed and loved, but he couldn't shake this. And it was a moment where a decision had to be made, and they agreed that he was going to go, and off he went. And as he walked off, and I was busy sitting on the couch, God said to me, do not fear. I have overcome the world. And in that moment, the encouragement, the sense of not being alone, like this guy was saying on TV, even though he was surrounded by his competitors and they're more like family together, that sense of not being alone was no longer there. And it reminded me that we live life to a different story. Are you afraid? Are you full of fear this morning? Why don't you begin by learning the story you're a part of? How do you do it? It's quite simple, really. Go into YouTube, go to Grapevine Church Durbanville, YouTube's page, click on the playlist option, start at week 1. Those devotions we are doing is not just for the sake of it, but is to help us be shaped by a different story. Do we repeat it over and over again? Yes, we do. Why? Because repetition is what shifts and changes instinct. And so that in moments, as I had yesterday, when fear grips us, we are listening to a different narrative. Thank God that as a church we believe God speaks in millions of ways. I'd hate to be in a church where we believe God only speaks in one way, and that's through the Bible. Don't get me wrong. The best, primary, and the most important way God speaks is through Scripture. But last night, God could use a bunch of Aussies, which freaks me out, on a TV program to speak deep truth into my situation. As you go about your day to day, be blessed that you and I are sons and daughters of the King, Jesus, who now rules this world. And you know what? Many Christians don't really believe it, but he actually knows what he is doing. God bless you.
Christ is risen. We watch this Jeremiah mired down in mud, in cistern, in fear and hostility all around him, finally extricated by watching friends who have done your work. We watch this Jesus set deep in the grip of death, but not held. Held overnight, but not held. Held 2 nights, but not held, because the power of death could not hold him. We know ourselves to be held overnight, for 2 nights, too long. Held by fear and anxiety, held by grudge and resentment, held by doubt and fatigue, held by too much stuff, by all manner of the forces of death, held powerless, but turned toward you. You in your risenness make Sundays even for us, even among us, even here, even now. No longer held. Amen.
Blessed be your name, land that is plentiful, where streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name, found in the desert place, or walk through the wilderness. Blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be your name, the sun shining down on me, when the world's all as it should be. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name, road marking suffering, there was pain in the offering. Blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. And take away, give and take away. My heart will choose to say, blessed be your name. Give and take away, give and take